So it's funny, I was thinking about something that happened at the beginning of my career. I first went to work for the New York Times a long time ago, 1962. I had worked for United Press for 2 or 3 years in the South. And I joined the Washington Bureau of the New York Times. And one of the things you had to do at the New York Times was you had to go do an orientation for about 3 months in New York City. What had happened was there were independent fiefdoms around the world, and Washington was one of the biggest ones. And the editors in New York wanted to make sure that the reporters who were hired for other places like Washington or overseas were fully acquainted with all the departments, the book review, the News of the Week in Review, the magazine, the Metro desk, the national desk, the foreign desk, and so on and so forth. So I went up and I did a guy named J. Anthony Lucas, who wrote a number of good books and won a Pulitzer Prize and was a marvelous correspondent. He and I joined the New York Times on the same day, July 9th, 1962. I remember the day because it was my birthday. So I spent my first week there, and I left my family. I was then married and had a child. I left my family in Washington where I was going to go to work. And so I went back down to Washington at the end of this week, and the following Sunday, I was getting ready to go to the airport to fly up to New York for my second week, and I got a call from the national desk at the New York Times, and they said, forget coming to New York. You're going to go to Albany, Georgia. Martin Luther King is running some demonstrations down in Albany, Georgia. Claude Sitton, our Southern correspondent, is there waiting for you. He's got to go to Ole Miss because John Meredith is trying to get into Ole Miss. He's got to go over to Mississippi to cover that story, and we need another reporter down in Albany, Georgia. You're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you next. I had to get in touch with a woman named Barbara Gamarikian at the Washington Bureau and check out an Olivetti portable typewriter. That's what we wrote. That's what I said.
You don't know what one is.
You know what an Olivetti portable typewriter is? So it looks like it's thicker than a computer. That's what we used to carry. I carried one of those darn things all over the Middle East and Russia and all over all kinds of places because we didn't have computers at that time. We didn't have laptops. There was nothing that luxurious. God, have I got some stories to tell you. It's really funny what I did. Anyway, so I get this laptop and I check out, and I have no money in particular, so I got to get an advance from this woman, Barbara Gamarikian. I don't know the telephone number. At that time, when we delivered stories to the New York Times, we dictated the stories verbally into a recording room. There were people in the recording room, and they typed the stories out. I didn't know the number of the recording room. I hadn't really gotten acquainted with the editors on the national desk yet. And I certainly hadn't been following the story. I can't even remember. I guess I had to get some paper because we typed up our stories on paper and we had carbon paper. Did you realize I realized I started this job back in the year of Demosthenes.
This is the olden days.
This is ancient Greece, right? This is the olden days. I'm getting a kick out of remembering this while I'm talking to you. When you first asked the question, my response was I was actually out in the field. I wasn't in the newsroom, so I don't know what the heck was going on in the newsroom, to be perfectly honest. But the truth of the matter is, it was Lily White. I mean, it was obscene. That's a trend that's good. And it's not just good because it's more fair. It's because the avenues of information that are coming into central media are wider. And we're getting a perspective that we didn't have before, which we should have. And we got many more health reporters than we used to have. And we're people who know much more about science than we used to have. And there are a lot of good developments that have taken place in the mainstream media to draw in more sources, more avenues, more rivers of information, if you will, flowing into the newsroom so we can make a judgment. If you look at the front page of major newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, and so forth, and look at them today or over the last 5 years, and you compare them with 25 years ago, the kinds of stories that are on the front page today or on the fronts of the second section and the third section and the fourth section are quite different from what they used to be. And they represent an expansion of the idea that I articulated earlier, that what's news is not just what happened yesterday, but it's your increased understanding of the world around you, and how do we keep feeding that process. And that's been a very healthy trend, I think,